It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Terror comes to New Orleans. 10 people are killed after a car was driven into crowds during New Year's celebrations. The suspect is identified as a US Army veteran who had an Islamic State flag inside his vehicle. The FBI says he was not acting alone. Also tonight, Elon Musk says we've never seen anything like this after a Tesla cybertruck explodes outside one of Donald Trump's hotels, killing the driver and injuring several others.
Oh my God!
We're in Greater Manchester, where flooding has led to a major incident. At least 10 people, including 2 children, are killed in a shooting at a bar in Montenegro. Plus, how we and the rest of the world celebrated the arrival of 2025. And bang on target, 17-year-old Luke Littler's heading for a place in the semi-finals of the World Darts Championship. Now we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in the press preview from 10:30. Good evening and a happy new year. We start in New Orleans tonight, where a terror attack has left at least 10 people dead and injured dozens more. US Army veteran Shamsud-Din Jabbar has been named as the attacker who drove a pickup truck into crowds gathered for New Year's celebrations. The FBI says an Islamic State flag, weapons and a potential IED were all recovered from the vehicle. Tonight, investigations are underway to find out who may have helped him. Well, the attack happened in the French Quarter of New Orleans, an area popular for partying. At around 3:15 a.m, police say a man intentionally drove a pickup truck into a crowd of people along Bourbon Street. Authorities say he drove round barricades in an area of the city lined with bars and restaurants. The suspect opened fire on police after crashing his vehicle, but he was killed in the shootout. Afterwards, officials recovered a handgun and rifle. They also say an ISIS flag was found in the truck. Weapons and a potential IED were discovered in the vehicle. Further explosives has since been discovered planted in the city. Well, tonight, the Associated Press news agency claims to have seen intelligence suggesting 4 people have been filmed planting one such device. Police have now warned the public to stay away from areas surrounding Bourbon Street. Our US correspondent James Matthews has more, and just a warning, his report contains a graphic description of the attack.
The early hours of New Year's Day in New Orleans. This was Bourbon Street, not long after 3 a.m. 2 people are seen lying in the street as armed officers race to the scene. In the heart of the city's French Quarter, a man had driven a pickup truck into crowds who'd come to clock in the new year.
It was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could. This perpetrator, who went around our barricades in order to conduct this, he was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did.
The attacker has been named as 42-year-old Shamsud-Din Jabbar, a US citizen from Texas. He was driving a rented Ford pickup. Having driven it through the crowd, he got out and started shooting at police officers. 2 were injured. Jabbar died in the ensuing firefight. This was Shamsud-Din Jabbar 4 years ago on a YouTube video introducing himself as a property manager.
I just want to say hello and let you know a little bit about me. So I'm born and raised in Beaumont, Texas, and now live in Houston. And I've been here all my life, with the exception of traveling for the military.
FBI investigators say he was ex-military and believe he was honorably discharged. In committing mass murder, they believe he wasn't acting alone.
We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates.
Weapons were recovered from the vehicle, as well as an improvised explosive device. Other devices were found in the vicinity. An ISIS flag was also recovered from the pickup. Investigators are calling this a suspected terror attack and are looking into potential links with terror groups.
This has all the hallmarks of being a terrorist attack, including the size of the event that was targeted, the fact that it was a recognized New Year holiday here in the United States, and also the fact that a vehicle was used. As we know, Al-Qaeda and ISIS have been calling over the past several decades for the use of vehicles to be used to carry out terrorist attacks.
The world comes to New Orleans to party all year round. It did last night. Tens of thousands were gathered downtown. Of the victims, police said most were local to the area. Revelers spoke of the panic that spread through the crowd. One man spoke to our partners at NBC amid questions over security.
We have tank barricades, like the metal, hydraulic raising, unrammable barricades, because this has happened so many times. When we got there, me and my friend were surprised that they hadn't put these up. They never put the barricades up. This man was able to hit 70 miles an hour for a clean 8 to 10 blocks down Bourbon.
For now, the key security questions centre on barriers placed between the attacker and his victims. President Biden issued a statement saying his heart went out to the victims. As he flew to Camp David, he said more.
I've spoken to every member of the agency, from the CIA to our national security team, to our FBI, NSC, and we're gathering all the, and I spent a lot of time with the government, with the mayor.
What was your reaction when you heard what happened?
Well, the reaction was one of anger and frustration.
The iconic streets that welcomed large crowds are now empty, thousands having come to see in 2025 with a fresh eye and witnessed carnage. James Matthews, Sky News in Washington.
Well, NBC's Jesse Kirsch is at the scene for us tonight and sent this update.
A short time ago, officials here in New Orleans held a press conference and gave us an update after that deadly ramming incident overnight. What we know at this point is as follows. First of all, the Sugar Bowl, which was set to be played this evening here at the Superdome, has been postponed at least 24 hours to tomorrow night. I asked officials what gives them the confidence they can put that on safely tomorrow night, and the governor simply said because he will be there. So we don't have much clarity at this point on what exactly officials are doing to ramp up security or reassess the security situation, considering the fact that they acknowledge there may have been deficiencies on Bourbon Street where this attack happened overnight. Officials tell us that there were some bollards, those posts that go about waist high and can protect sidewalks or street areas, that some of those were being in the midst of a repair project, and officials tell us that there was also a lift gate that was not functioning properly. But officials tell us that all of those elements of a security apparatus that were not working properly or were not in place or were in the midst of being repaired did have a backup security situation to fill in those gaps. So officials tell us they did have backup security situation in place. However, officials also did acknowledge that the barriers, the bollards that are on Bourbon Street did not extend to protect the sidewalk. And that is where officials tell us that the suspect allegedly maneuvered the vehicle and was able to careen down Bourbon Street, according to officials, killing at least 10 people. That is what authorities allege this suspect did in this incident. That suspect now deceased, according to authorities as well. We continue to push for answers on why the security situation was as it was overnight, what more is being done, and we continue to wait to see what will unfold here as authorities tell us that they have found and rendered safe at least 2 IEDs, and also say they do not believe this suspect acted alone. Back to you.
Well, some breaking news also coming out of the US tonight. One person has died and 7 others were injured when a Tesla cybertruck caught fire and exploded outside US President-elect Donald Trump's Las Vegas hotel. Our colleagues at NBC News have heard from 3 senior law enforcement officials briefed on the matter that it is now being looked at as a possible terror attack. Well, police say 1 person died in the vehicle and no cause has yet been given for the fire and the explosion. The 7 others who were injured have been taken to hospital. Well, in a post on X, Tesla CEO Elon Musk said the whole Tesla team is investigating this matter right now. We'll post more as soon as we learn anything. We've never seen anything like this. Also hearing from our NBC colleagues that authorities have not stated a possible motive for the Cybertruck explosion, but the car was rented from the same rental company that facilitated the truck used in New Orleans to an individual they haven't named publicly. That's according to two officials and reported by our colleagues at NBC News. The investigation into the explosion of that Tesla Cybertruck is being looked at as a possible terror attack. Keeping across that throughout the evening. Back here, flooding led to a major incident being declared in Greater Manchester today, with mountain rescue teams drafted in to help save those who became stranded. Across the UK, 100 flood warnings are now in place after wind and rain hit parts of the country. The weather looks set to worsen in the coming days, with temperatures set to plummet tonight and snow forecast for the weekend. Our North of England correspondent, Caterina Vitozzi, sent this report from Stockport.
Oh my God!
After a month of rain in just 2 days, coming home for some looked like this. At a block of flats in Greater Manchester, residents woke up to see they were trapped.
Hiya.
Hiya, can you hear me?
Yeah, so the first thing we noticed overall was a power cut before we saw the water. And then after that, it just sort of encroached and got higher and higher. And then we tried the lights weren't working, there was no water. And then we looked outside and saw this. And yeah, it's not the best way to spend New Year's.
And do you feel like it's safe there? I mean, water and power, it's not a good mix, is it? How are you feeling?
It's a shock, to be honest.
A few hours later, cold and tired, they were evacuated. They don't know when they'll be able to return.
The people who live here have told us that this flood water rushed in the middle of the night, and it was quickly well over the top of all of these cars that are still now stuck here. It's not, though, just people in these flats that have been affected. Behind me, there's a furniture business, there's offices and an industrial estate who are now all having to start this new year in a quite frankly miserable way.
Greater Manchester Police declared a major incident, working with fire and mountain rescue teams to reach the stranded. The Environment Agency has issued more than 100 flood warnings, most like here in the northwest of England.
I live near Timpley Brook, and that's now 2 foot higher than it normally runs.
Travel warnings are in place, trains delayed and drivers urged to take care. Because although the rain has eased, the danger has not passed.
And this is exactly what happened on 2019. It stopped raining and we were saved, basically, because it stopped raining.
Barry Rudd has been a volunteer flood warden since 2019, when this reservoir near the town of Whaley Bridge nearly burst after heavy rain.
And if you look to the left there, you can see the pumps working flat out. If we get more rain, I've already put the warning out, we will activate the community flood plan.
It is the start to a new year no one would wish for. With the Met Office warning things may well get worse before they get better. Caterina Vitozzi, Sky News, Greater Manchester.
At least 10 people, including 2 children, have been killed in a shooting in Montenegro. Police are hunting for the suspected gunman in the city of Cetinje, just 30 kilometres north of the capital. Detectives say a 45-year-old man opened fire in a bar before fleeing the scene. Let's get an update from our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons. Adam, do we know why this man began shooting?
It would appear to have been a dispute that got completely out of control. The man that is understood to be the focus of is a man called Ato Martinovic, who's 45 years old, has apparently got previous arrest for illegal possession of weapons in Montenegro, which is a country where there is a very high level of gun ownership. It would seem that he was in this bar, a row broke out, that it became very heated, that he then went back to his home, got a weapon, returned to that bar and opened fire, wounding and killing some people, and then went to a separate address that the home of the person who owned the bar, killed that person and also killed the person's two children. Now, as you might imagine, the reaction from the police has been immediate and strong. Special forces have been sent to the area in pursuit of this man. By a horrible coincidence, it's just 3 years since Cetinje, this town, was witness to another mass shooting where 10 people were also killed on that occasion. So far, this man hasn't been captured, but there are clearly troops and police out looking for him, and his image has been published. The police are saying to people this is not a gang crime, but telling people to stay indoors. Condemnation, of course, coming from all quarters, from the Prime Minister, from the President, from the Interior Minister, people talking of their sense of absolute shock. Cetinje, this is not a small town. This is the historic capital of Montenegro. And as you said, only 30 kilometres or so from the capital itself. 3 days of national mourning have been initiated in a country that is small, only 620,000 people in Montenegro, and yet this country has been shaken by what has happened. Clearly, talk of mass killings farther away in the United States are now happening on its doorstep. Also expressions of sympathy coming from the neighbours. And as I say, a country where the high gun ownership is, I think, referenced in the fact that a popular saying is that a Montenegrin home is a home with a gun. Well, that may have just played out in the most horrible terms.
Adam, for now, thank you. New figures have revealed that 2024 was the deadliest year for people trying to cross the English Channel. The number of people attempting the deadly journey rose by a quarter compared to the previous year. Sky's Rachel Venables reports.
They died on a desperate journey, crushed into packed, leaking dinghies in dangerous waters, trying to get to Britain.
The water got to my waist, my trousers were submerged in the water. Then the dinghy burst and I don't know how it happened, but everyone fell on top of each other and on top of me and my little girl. She went into the water. I have come with the aim of getting to Britain so my children will have a future and so I can feed my children. I want to work and raise my children like any other children.
It's been the deadliest year yet for small boat crossings on the Channel, but more and more people keep trying to make it to England's beaches. More than 36,800 people made the journey in 2024, a 25% jump on the previous year. But it's still down 20% on the highest year on record, when more than 45,000 crossings were made in 2022.
This is almost certainly driven by world events. I mean, we're looking at 120 million people displaced around the world, of which over 40 million, well over 40 million, are refugees outside their own country. So as long as these world events continue, then of course people driven by fear, desperation, are bound to make their way to Calais and try and get across to the UK for safety.
For years, a parade of prime ministers have promised to tackle the small boats crisis.
If you come illegally, you are an illegal migrant, and I'm afraid the law will treat you as such.
We need to make sure that the appalling people traffickers don't succeed in bringing small boats across the English Channel.
We are making progress to stop the boats.
The only way to stop this is to smash those gangs.
Those slogans might have changed as the government in power changed, but this is still a fiendishly difficult task for the Home Office to achieve. Sir Keir Starmer scrapped the Tories' Rwanda deportation scheme, instead saying he wants to treat people smugglers like terrorists and putting in extra cash for his new Border Security Command. But for now, the boats keep on coming.
It's quite clear all of the current approaches are completely failing, whether it was the Tories' Rwanda plan, which was a farce, and the current Labour government's plan of smashing the gangs is not making any difference whatsoever.
A Home Office spokesperson said the people smuggling gangs don't care if the vulnerable people they exploit live or die, as long as they pay. We will stop at nothing to dismantle their business models and bring them to justice. But it seems inevitable that 2025 will see yet more crossings and likely even more deaths, as smugglers continue to profit from those desperate enough to risk it all. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
Our political correspondent, Darren McCaffrey, joins us now from Westminster. Darren, the Prime Minister has promised to smash the gangs, but at some stage this year, he is going to need to see results.
Yeah, definitely, and that is not least of all because, Jonathan, the public will expect that. It is, a major political issue. The Prime Minister knows that one of the reasons the Conservative Party lost the election only 6 months ago was because, in part, of their failure to deal with the small boats crisis. And yet we've had more people arrive in the last 6 months under a Labour government than we did in the first 6 months of last year. So clearly, politically, this is quite difficult. There's pressure not just from the Conservatives, but also from Nigel Farage's reform as well. And as I say, the government will get to a point where it can no longer just blame the Conservative Party, that it is going to have to take on this challenge. Now, as you say, the Prime Minister's repeatedly talked about trying to smash the gangs. That was again in the Home Office statement today. And while the government are making moves to try and do that, whether that's giving extra money to Border Force and extra powers, there's talk about changing the law later on this week as well, many will ask whether that is simply enough, whether smashing the gangs will solve this problem. As I said, the Prime Minister seems to think that is at the root cause of all of this, but many, including critics of the government, would suggest that actually there still needs to be some form of deterrent. Now, clearly there was a Rwanda plan. That has been dumped by this government. There is no sense, Jonathan, that's going to come back. But I suspect, unless the numbers really fall quite dramatically this year, others will start asking the government if it does need another form of deterrence, if it's prepared to go further, and if it is, what that might look like. We'll have to wait and see, but be in no doubt this is going to be as big a political issue this year as it was last.
OK, Darren in Westminster, thank you. Russian gas exports to Europe via pipelines running through Ukraine stopped earlier today after a transit deal expired. The European Commission has played down the impact, saying it had been expected and that the bloc was prepared for it. Ukraine said it didn't renew the deal because of Russia's continuing invasion. It's 40 years since the first ever mobile call was made in Britain using this phone, weighing 5 kilograms. At midnight on the 1st of January 1985, Michael Harrison called his dad, the Vodafone founder, Sir Ernest Harrison, from London's Parliament Square. Michael told us what he said on that historic call and described the reaction.
I said, "Hi, Dad, it's Mike here. Happy New Year. This is the first call ever made on a UK mobile network." So you see all these revelers, took that bloke with a very scary mask, all around, and they were looking at what I was doing. And clearly, people were just confused because most people, in fact, I bet you nobody there had ever seen a mobile phone.
Midnight on New Year's Eve. I'm surprised he managed to get a signal. Let's get the latest sport now from Vicky at Sky Sports News.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I can remember standing in the paddock at the Victoria Ground. One of the coaches said, "You had an exceptional tournament there. People are starting to notice you now." And I came away from that evening, I was buzzing.
This is Rich Wilkinson, 16 years old, living the dream at Stoke City. Like so many others, he was released, but Rich took a different path. He trained as a therapist to counsel people with shared experiences.
Are you saying that for you back then, your entire status and feeling of self-worth was bound in with your football?
Absolutely. Everything was football. The confidence it gave me, self-esteem it gave me, this athletic identity. It starts from the moment that people around you are telling you you're good.
Explain to me a bit more about that athletic identity then.
It's almost like this false reality that you create for yourself. So if you imagine after deselection, when that's gone, that athletic identity doesn't serve in the real world anymore. This is where a lot of the problems come for deselected football players, because they're still trying to feed off that person.
I notice you use the phrase deselected footballers, not dropped footballers.
No.
That's
no.
presumably deliberate.
Absolutely deliberate, and I think it doesn't sit very well with rejection. I don't think it gives that player enough credit, if that makes sense. Let's be realistic here. You know, how many deselected players keep football clubs going? You know, without the deselected players, there is no football team. When I sat in therapy myself, one of the first things my therapist said to me was that you did okay. And I'd never thought that. I'd always treated it like a rejection.
Did you feel a failure when you were deselected?
So for me, the family bathroom in our home was the place where I did a lot of my decompressing, processing as a football player. I spent a lot of my time in that room mulling over my game, how I played, what I could do better, what I failed at, what I was listening to. It was a really poignant place for me. So when it came to me getting the news about whether I was going to be taken on with a contract or whether I was going to be deselected, I took the letter to that bathroom and locked the door. I looked at it and it was soul destroying. From that day on, I always told myself that I was okay, but I really wasn't. And it's sad when I look back on it now and I think about it, because I shut football down completely. I didn't watch it ever again. I didn't read about it. I just removed it.
How did you get from there to where you are now?
I was warned that if I go into this area and start looking at this, it could be too traumatic. I might not be able to do it. Because I'd got unresolved trauma, it was dangerous. I'd left the 17-year-old boy in the bathroom. I felt like I needed to go back in mentally to get in. And I worked with a fantastic counsellor who was able to support me in. What I was actually doing was I was telling myself that like my dream was over. It was the first time I'd done it for 20 years, so it was huge. I was so angry that this was still going on all these years later. How can deselected players still be taking their lives, still be suffering from depression, anxiety, addiction, you know, taking drugs, drinking, gambling, you know, totally ruining their lives? How can that still be going on now?
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
An update on the news that a Tesla cybertruck has exploded outside Donald Trump's hotel in Las Vegas. One person inside that vehicle has died. Elon Musk has just put a message out on X once again, the CEO, of course, of Tesla. We have now confirmed that the explosion was caused by very large fireworks and/or a bomb carried in the bed of the rented Cybertruck and is unrelated to the vehicle itself. All vehicle telemetry was positive at the time of the explosion. Earlier, Elon Musk said the whole Tesla senior team is investigating this matter right now. We'll post more information as soon as we learn anything. We have never seen anything like this. It follows the news that the investigation into the explosion is being looked at as a possible terror attack. 3 senior law enforcement officials have briefed NBC News to say they are looking at it as a possible terror attack. Keeping across that, of course, throughout the evening. Now, people around the world have been celebrating the arrival of 2025 with spectacular fireworks displays in the likes of London, Sydney and New York. Sajid Chowdhury has this report.
The first 12 minutes of 2025 in London. Lights, colour and loud bangs. 12,000 fireworks to tell the story of the year just gone. The theme this year was hope for what comes next.
Magical inside, the soul just feels magical, life just feels magical.
Sky's Tom Parmenter in the middle of all of it, ending up in a cuddle.
I thought it was amazing, the crowd spectacular, the atmosphere, electric. Yeah, we made it, man. Happy New Year, man. Happy New Year.
Come on. Bring it in, baby. Bring it in.
London escaped the windy weather warnings, but Edinburgh didn't. Celebrations there had to be cancelled. Across the world, celebrations were led by Auckland. The city's skyline exploded in colour as New Zealand welcomed in 2025.
3, 2, 1, Happy New Year!
For a spectacular senses overload, Sydney, 2 hours later, was the place to be. More than 1 million people watched the sky light up in every direction, and a curtain of golden light rained down from the harbour bridge. A more muted approach in Japan. And in Thailand, a neon flotilla set the scene for Bangkok. before the night sky burst into an explosion of light. This was the show in the United Arab Emirates. The world's tallest building, Dubai's Burj Khalifa, radiated above the city. In Europe, the Arc de Triomphe became the dazzling centerpiece for Paris. Hours later, in a cloud of confetti, the crowd in New York counted down to midnight. The city's famous crystal ball finished its descent to usher in the new year. A Times Square tradition dating back to 1907. A global array of displays, many bigger and better than ever before. A fitting welcome to 2025. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News.
Just wonderful, everyone trying to outdo each other with those fireworks displays. Got some more breaking news for you. Luke Littler has beaten Nathan Aspinall 5-2 to reach the semi-finals of the World Darts Championship. That was the winning dart. The 17-year-old will face 8th seed Stephen Bunting at Alexandra Palace tomorrow evening for a place in the final. Congratulations to Luke Littler. And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, I'm joined by the broadcaster and financial analyst, Albie Amankona, and the editor-in-chief of nationalworld.com, Nancy Fielder. And among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of tomorrow's Daily Mail. Their headline, New Orleans killer has ISIS flag on truck. We'll be back to discuss that and plenty more in a couple of minutes.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a drug?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
A very good evening. You're watching the press preview. It's our first look at what is on tomorrow's front pages. And tonight we'll be taking a look at the headlines with the broadcaster and financial analyst, Albie Amankona, and the editor-in-chief of nationalworld.com, Nancy Fielder. A very good evening. Happy New Year to you both. We shall chat in a moment. Let's have a look at some of the front pages then, starting with the Express, leading with the attack in New Orleans. Their headline, Terror Driver Hell-Bent on Carnage Kills 10. The Telegraph reports on the same story, saying that an Islamic State terror cell is believed to be behind the attack. Now, while the FBI has said they believe the suspect didn't act alone, they haven't gone as far as attributing the attack directly to ISIS. The Daily Mail's headline reads, New Orleans killer has ISIS flag on truck. The Times also leads on that story. According to The Eye, emergency courts set up in hotels and conference centres during the pandemic are still working their way through their caseloads, but are now so far behind schedule, some cases may not be heard until 2028. Here's tomorrow's FT reporting on the chip maker NVIDIA investing $1 billion into AI technology, much of which is already powered by the company's chips. And the Star comes up Trump's, with a story about how ridding the world of cow flatulence will supposedly save us from global warming. And don't forget, you can scan the QR code you see on screen during the programme. Use your mobile, check out the front pages of the papers while you watch us discussing them. And I'm joined tonight by Albie Amankona and Nancy Fielder. How nice to see you both here on New Year's Day. Lots to talk about, and what a miserable start to 2025. It's quite unbelievable, isn't it, what has been happening in the United States. Let's start with the front of The Guardian. It's on all the front pages, of course it is, because who can fail to be moved by the news that many people out enjoying the New Year's Eve celebrations in an iconic city, an iconic setting, and then somebody goes and does this. 10 dead after that truck drives into the crowds. Nancy, your thoughts?
I mean, I think you sum it up. These are people who went to enjoy themselves, to be happy. They've gone to a place that is known for its partying, for being relaxed, for having a great time. They were still out at 3 a.m, hours long in bed, but these are people who are just there to enjoy themselves. And somebody deliberately takes a very heavy truck and drives it as hard as they can to kill people, and then gets out and starts shooting. It is the most horrendous situation, the worst possible start to the new year. And as you said, I mean, 10 dead, but dozens injured. So that number may well even go up. And your heart goes out to everybody who was there. The people, I mean, we all get in touch with our families and friends, don't we, around that time? Happy New Year. And this is just the worst possible start. Oh, and it's so similar to other attacks we've had just before Christmas. It just feels like such an easy way to kill people in such a horrendous situation.
I know, and so many questions, aren't there, regarding this? The fact that an ISIS flag was found in the vehicle, reports from our colleagues tonight at NBC that there's potential video of other people planting an improvised explosive device in New Orleans. The fact that the FBI don't necessarily believe he was acting alone. Where are we heading, do you think?
First of all, I just want to echo what's just been said. It's the most awful way to start the new year. 10 dead, over 30 injured. I mean, listening to some of the eyewitness accounts, Anne Kirkpatrick, who was a police chief, said in the Telegraph, he was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did. What an awful way to start the year. And I think the question is, what is going to happen when Donald Trump takes the presidency? We've already seen Donald Trump trying to get some political capital from this, saying that it was foreigners, but actually this gentleman is believed to be a US Army veteran. born in the United States of America. There's no suggestion that this is some sort of foreign criminal that has committed this heinous crime. Whereas Joe Biden has been much more presidential in the way that he's responded to this, saying that my heart goes out to the victims and their families who are simply trying to celebrate the holiday.
There is also the alternative view that during Trump's first presidency, actually he made strong efforts to dampen down ISIS and made efforts to stop this sort of thing from happening in a way that perhaps we've taken our eye off the ball more recently. Is we don't hear about ISIS attacks, do we, in the way that we used to? And perhaps now we are seeing a resurgence and they are taking risks, and we know that part of the ideology is to use vehicles in this manner. It's something we've heard about for years.
It is a message that ISIS has put out to its supporters that this is actually a really easy, powerful way to cause devastation and heartbreak in the West. I mean, the images, there's one on the front page, and it looks almost like there's a flagpole, and they've covered up the ISIS flag on the front of the Express. It's a flagpole, and they've you can see it there, look, they've covered it up. But it wasn't in hiding, and you're right, it feels like a long time. We've had terror attacks, we've had awful incidents, very similar to this, but not so proudly, we believe, waving an ISIS flag, and it makes you, it scares you, doesn't it? This type of incident always scares you, but to think this is a coordinated attack, they're looking for other people, and it could have been much worse because they were talking about bombs, and the police responded quite quickly, so the shooting ended fairly quickly. But I just think, yeah, the ISIS element is terrifying. I don't have any confidence that Donald Trump would make ISIS attacks lessen, though.
Let's just have a look at the front of the Daily Mail. Their headline, very similar. New Orleans killer had ISIS flag on truck. A terrorist who killed at least 10 by driving into New Year crowds was a US Army veteran who didn't act alone. Also questions. I mean, it's sort of unbelievable that this is even being discussed, but the fact that maybe barriers and barricades weren't working properly, that the vehicle managed to get up onto the pavement, or the sidewalk, as they would say in America, and just get around those barriers. And you think, if you're going to hold huge gatherings of members of the public, and you know that these sort of attacks are a possibility, like we saw in Germany, then you need to make sure that the security is watertight.
And Mardi Gras season's just about to start.
Yeah, yeah.
You do, and it is always very surprising, especially because this isn't the first time we've ever heard of an attack like this. One happened in Germany, something very similar. They've happened all across Europe. So it does surprise me when there's not the civil infrastructure to stop this sort of thing from happening.
OK. Let's move on then to... let's talk about politics, shall we? Start of a new year. Why don't we? Front of The Guardian, page 1, low turnout is a threat to local democracy. Why don't you start us off on this one?
So, I mean, this is a very different type of story, but a very, very depressing story. It says that we are close to tipping point, that elections we hold here are basically, they're losing legitimacy because huge numbers of people aren't voting, and it points out specific groups. If you rent your home rather than own it, you're much less likely to vote. If you haven't got a degree, then you're much less likely to vote. It's not whether you're clever or degree, it's where you're born, isn't it, where you grow up. And it is just incredibly depressing that actually only certain sections of society believe in our politicians and our political system enough to have a say.
What do we do about that? How do we change it?
I think we probably need more powerful messages that they actually aren't all the same. And I hate to say it, but we sat here for years, didn't we, complaining about how the Conservatives didn't really represent real people and that they were all in it for themselves. And then sadly, we've had very similar stories even under the few weeks that Labour have been in charge. There is, when we speak to readers, that message that's been going for years, they're all the same. What is the point? Is just so loud. And let's be honest, Keir Starmer was not brought in on a wave of glory because they wanted him for Prime Minister. He was brought in because they were voting for the worst of the... least of the worst. What's the phrase? You know what I mean? It's depressing. People voted for somebody who they thought they wouldn't necessarily vote for. They just couldn't bear to vote for the alternative.
Yeah. I'll get your thoughts on that in a moment, but we're just hearing some more news coming out of the United States, depressing news, I'm afraid, regarding that attack we've been discussing in New Orleans. Local media in the States is reporting that the number of dead has gone up from 10 to 15 now. We did know, didn't we, that many people were severely injured, some of them critically, and it was always the fear that perhaps more people would be pronounced dead, and I'm sad to say that that is the case. The death toll in the New Orleans truck attack has increased to 15, local media citing a coroner's statement. Albie, just to return to the political situation there, and I lived in Australia for a few years, and in Australia you have to vote by law, whether you like it or not, and it becomes quite an interesting polling day, because people queue outside polling stations, and people have barbecues and they sell sausage rolls and hot dogs and things while people queue up, because it's something everyone has to do. Now, you can choose not to, but you get fined. Is that a solution?
Personally, I support the Australian approach to this. I mean, it seems like quite an authoritarian measure, but I do actually think voting in elections is just so important that it is something that should be mandated. And if Australia can do it, I don't know why we can't do it in the United Kingdom. And I think what's particularly concerning about some of this research from the Institute for Public Policy Research is that actually this problem has become worse in 2024 than it was in 2019. So I think what we're seeing here is that those without university degrees, the gap grew to 11 percentage points, which is double that of what it was in 2019. So what's happened in the last 5 years that's made people less trusting of our voting system?
Yeah, interesting. OK, we will leave it there for the moment. Thank you both. Plenty more still to come, including we'll take a look at how the extremely cold weather could be a danger to people's health. That's coming up next. Don't go away.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death. Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe.
Why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder. Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news. It's over, isn't it? The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster. This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country. A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Innes after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News. The full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello again, welcome back. Part 2 of the press preview. Albie and Nancy still with me in the studio. Let's turn our attention to the front of the Times. Albie, the Bank of England will be forced to cut interest rates. Well, they're saying at least 4 times this year.
Yes, there's been a poll of economists, and the Times is reporting on this, and they're essentially saying that they believe these economists who have been polled, that the Bank of England will be forced to cut interest rates 4 times, so that's once a quarter. There were 2 rate cuts in 2024. And I have to say I was pretty surprised to read this, because I think there are a lot of analysts in the city who aren't necessarily thinking that there are going to be 4 rate cuts in 2025, especially given the direction of the economy at the moment. So I found that quite surprising. But what do interest rate cuts actually mean to our viewers? Well, the chief thing that it means is if it feeds into mortgage rates, it means everyone that holds a mortgage or is renewing their mortgage in 2024 could have a lower mortgage. And obviously we know that that has been one of the key drivers of the cost of living crisis, has been this spike in mortgage rates that we've seen. So it could be a good thing for homeowners and renters alike if these rate cuts do go ahead. But I have to say, I would be surprised if we saw 4 in 2025, in my opinion.
Yeah, what is your projection, really, for the economy in the next few months?
I think the economy is in a very tricky spot at the moment. There is no doubt about it at all. Business confidence is very low. They're very unhappy about the national insurance contributions rise. In fact, very little of the economic problems that we've seen over the past couple of years, very little of those problems have gone away. The situation hasn't actually changed that much. So I'm not...
Well, inflation's come down, hasn't it?
Inflation's come down, but in terms of what were the drivers of inflation, Rachel Reeves will be talking about the Ukraine war. That is still going on. Talking about the energy prices being high. That is still going on. So actually, a lot of the fundamental drivers of things like inflation, and we've seen inflation go back up, of course, maybe it'll continue to go up, they've not actually changed. The fundamentals are still the same. So I think this sense of optimism that we perhaps had for the economy getting better, I'm not really sure why we have it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Quick thought on this, Nancy, before we move on.
People are desperate for their mortgages to come down. It's not actually that long since people on really low salaries suddenly face £500 extra to pay on a mortgage. Bills are enormously high. We do need some changes because people can't afford to live. I'm not saying this is necessarily the way to do it, but actually let's not forget, cost of living crisis is a phrase that we say a lot. It's really difficult for your average family out there.
Yeah, it really is. OK. Finance, your field of expertise. Cold weather in the north, your field of expertise. Health warnings, temperatures fall. They could go down to -10, according to the Telegraph.
Yeah, and the Met Office is saying it's going to be so cold that schools might not even open next week.
Right.
I mean, it was absolute chaos travelling today. My daughter was trying to get back to Edinburgh from Sheffield and just train after train cancelled. We had friends trying to get to Manchester Airport. Absolutely, they said those platforms were covered in people crying because they were missing their flights, they were missing their trains. And for people living in Manchester, I've got friends their gardens were flooded, it was coming to their homes. It was absolutely chaotic. It was horrendous. I mean, when Scotland cancels Hogmanay, when Edinburgh has to pull the plug on Hogmanay, you know the weather is bad. But it's going to get much, much worse. And I think we talk about the changes that Labour are bringing in, that people struggle to pay the bills every single year. Hundreds, the charities would say thousands of people, old people, vulnerable people die because they're afraid to put on the heating. And it's going to be worse this winter.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And last winter, we saw terrible stories, didn't we, of people literally sitting on a bus and going round and round on a bus route just to keep warm.
Yes, it's going to be even harder, especially this winter, given that Labour have cut the winter fuel allowance. Now, personally, I am in favour of means testing the winter fuel allowance, but it doesn't really seem to me like a very Labour policy to cut the winter fuel allowance from the elderly.
Yeah, blanket warning of snow, heads up, it is going to be pretty tough, I think, over the next few days. OK, let's finish with the Daily Star. The cow that saved the world. This calf is Hilda. She holds the secret to a flatulence-free future for our cows and possibly even the solution to tackling global warming. Now, we know that methane gas caused by cows is a problem, isn't it? But maybe this is one of the solutions, Nancy.
I mean, Hilda might be the only good bit of news we've got on New Year's Day. So they've bred an IVF calf who apparently doesn't trump, so doesn't contribute to climate change. I mean, the images, look at those little toxic cows in the background. But I find this hard to believe, let's be honest. I don't think it's going to stop anybody having or not having their steak, but it's at least a laugh on a dog.
How do you think she looks about it, LB? Is she happy about it?
I'm not really sure. I have to say, I can't imagine cows not being able to let one off being particularly healthy for the cows. And also, if every single cow that we're going to farm now, if it's going to be done through IVF, I imagine that'd make beef a lot more expensive.
OK. All right, Albie, Nancy, thank you both very much. Lots more still to come on Sky News at 11. We'll have, of course, the latest on that attack in New Orleans that has killed 15 people.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.